Everybody, and welcome to our public hearing on the 9th Elementary School site. I'm Neil Wyszynski, the Chair of the Board of Selectmen. To my left is Susan Wolf Ditkoff, the Chair of the School Committee. Why don't we just go down the row and have the school committee members and the selectmen introduce themselves for those of you who don't know us.
Start down here. Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa Jackson, school committee member. Hello, I'm Beth Jackson Stram. I'm also a school committee member.
Mike Glover, also a school committee member.
Nancy Heller, Board of Selectmen.
Helen Charlepsky, School Committee.
David Pollock, School Committee.
Margaret Scotto, Vice Chair, School Committee.
Rebecca Stone, school committee.
Nancy Daly, Board of Selectmen.
Bernard Green, Board of Selectmen.
Mel Fleckner, Town Administrator. Joe Conley, Interim Superintendent. Ben Changs, School Committee member.
Okay, so I'm going to start with an apology. I've been kind of ill. My voice is cracking, and we'll see how long I last. I was going to do a short introduction, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to turn it over to Susan, who's going to kind of set the tone for the public hearing and perhaps lay some foundation, tell us where we are, why we're here, and where we're going.
Thank you, Selectman Wyszynski. The first thing I will do to set the tone is wish a very happy birthday to the Vice Chairman of the School Committee, Barbara Scotto. She has spent an hour in negotiations to an hour and a half in the school committee meeting, and she's more than delighted to spend her birthday here with all of you. So, and all of you will, I'm sure, sing happy birthday as the preface to your remarks. Thank you all for coming. We have gotten a tremendous outpouring of feedback on the 9th school study, some of which we're going to summarize here, a little bit of process, a little bit of what we've heard so far, and then we're going to open it up for the hearing. I will just note that we have over 50 people signed up, and so we'll talk about time limits in a moment, but just FYI. So if we go to the first slide, first of all, we want to say thank you to everyone who's been part of this process. Both boards are committed to a data-driven and transparent process. Just as a reminder, Civic Moxie was hired to deliver a data-driven report. They analyzed 26 sites and did a detailed study of 6 sites. The staff then analyzed those 6 sites and recommended the Cottage Farm and the Isabel sites to the boards as worthy of further analysis and due diligence, and so that's what we voted to do on October 22nd. And the full report was publicly released with the exception of cost information at the advice of our external counsel on eminent domain. But this has been pretty much the most transparent we could possibly be. There were all sorts of other versions of the report that were very much redacted, and those were not, those options weren't chosen. We've chosen to release everything except the cost information. We're currently in a public input gathering phase. We've had over a dozen public meetings so far. So we've had 2 open houses, which were attended by over 100 people each for all residents, one in the morning, one in the evening. We've met with 6 town boards and commissions, which are detailed on this sheet, if those of you who came in got it, with the Advisory Committee, the Preservation Commission, the Building Commission, with whom we'll meet again, Conservation, Parks and Rec, Transportation, and then many meetings with town meeting members and neighbors and residents in some of the more interested and affected areas. So this has been a pretty unprecedented amount of public input, and we're delighted to have it. In addition to all of the letters and the overwhelming number of emails that we've gotten and we've read, and we have not responded in detail to each one, but we have read them. In terms of the process going forward, there were a number of questions. This is what I would call an ideal timeline. Neil and I were working on that word. Ideal, hypothetical, ideal is where we ended up. But we are in this study phase right now through January. There'll be a deeper due diligence phase, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in the winter and through the summer. There'll be what we're hoping to be a final decision phase next fall. some schematic design phases, and then an approval phase in the beginning of 2017, leading up to, again, ideally, a vote of town meeting and/or a ballot initiative, or both, in the May 2017 timeframe for some version of a purchase or hopefully a friendly taking or purchase, and a debt exclusion to fund that, and votes from town meeting and participation that are needed to make all of that happen. And then ideally we would begin a final design phase that summer, and then ideally we would have a building sometime in the 2020 timeframe. If you note, there's the devil's always in the details. There's a little footnote here that says this is likely the fastest and most aggressive timetable possible, and you'll see why in a moment. If we hit all of these dates, it would be a miracle. So again, please don't expect that on February 1st something's going to happen in 2017. But the idea is that there is sort of a run-up in the next 18 months to try to get to a decision by May of 2017. I just want to note that many of you have said that this is a very quick time frame, that this feels very fast. Others of you have noted that we have been talking about this for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 years, depending on how long you've been a part of the dialogue. So time is relative, and so what we would say is we do need this building, and there's certainly consensus that we need a ninth school, and this is ideally what we would be aiming at. So we wanted to reflect some of the most frequent comments that we've heard in this very intensive public process so far. First, there's been a tremendous outpouring of excitement about a data-driven study. We've been talking about this as a town for a while, and people are very excited to have seen it, and a lot of comments about the depth and of analysis that was provided. Second, a consensus that a ninth school is needed. That's been something that we've talked about in the town for a long time. Third is that more need for clarity on the process after January, so what we did decide, what we didn't decide, what we will decide. Hopefully this timeline gives you an ideal sense of what we're aiming at, but obviously happy to answer more questions if needed. The fourth was needing more clarity on interaction with the high school project and the 3 versus 4 section school, which we'll talk about more in a couple weeks, but the basic idea is that we have already maxed out where we are. We are overflowing into rental space, not only for BEEPs and not only for adults, but also for our K-8s. So Baker is in portable classrooms, Pierce is in rented classrooms over the gym, over the Benefitness building. So we are already outpouring our K-8 classrooms. We have already increased class size by roughly 2 kids per class. And even with devotion coming online, we are we're looking at class sizes over 30 on a regular basis, and or potentially doing even more overflow into rental spaces or onto fields. And then the last idea was the question of considering sites beyond the 2 initially preferred sites, or even beyond the 26 considered by Civic Moxie, and certainly those are pieces that have come into the dialogue. A lot of interest in the 3 most frequently mentioned are the Stop and Shop site, the Pine Manor discussion, and Bournewood. There might be others, but those are the 3 that we've heard most often. And so again, if any of you have ideas, I'm sure we'll hear about them tonight. Let's talk about 2 sites in particular, the Cottage Farm site and the Isabel site. So on the Cottage Farm site, there were many positive comments about building in densely populated North Brookline. There were also some concerns about the effect on South Brookline of building so far in the north. There were comments about the effect on neighbors and the neighborhood and eminent domain in this location. There were comments about the effect on open space and then the environment. Some of which we'll hear about tonight, and specifically the swamp characteristics of Amory Playground, and specifically the vernal pools came up a number of times. And then there were 3 other sets of issues that were raised: traffic in that corner of town, local historic district and preservation issues, and just the general constraints of the site, especially if no buildings are taken, which was our assumption and was confirmed by the Preservation Commission that would be their assumption as well. The second preferred site for more due diligence was the Isabel School at the Larz Sheds. And every time we use the word Larz, we want to put the word sheds next to it, because when people hear at Larz, they think of the top of the beautiful sledding hill, and not a single person up here is interested in building a school at the top of the beautiful sledding hill. We are talking about upcycling a very poor use of important space right now, where there are sheds, and actually I wish we did have the photographs of them, because it is not what people think of when they think about Larz. And the people who have seen what we're talking about made a number of very positive comments about how the design would not infringe on prime green space, and how it would increase positive park use and upcycle a pretty unattractive right now piece of the park. However, there are issues. There is a potential use restriction due to the 1970s grant, which I won't go through here, but was a significant topic of discussion during town meeting. It is not dead, just to allay any concerns. It is not a dead issue, but it is a restriction, and it's something that we're, legal counsel is still looking at. There are open space issues, of course, and just what are the effects of this on Larz Anderson Park as a whole of increased use. In terms of redistricting, while it is true that the town overall is very walkable with a site at the Isabel School at the Larz Sheds, the school itself would not have many, if at all, depending on how you define, walkable families. So it would be creating a commuter school. People who are currently commuting to other schools would be commuting to this school, and that would just have a very different feel from an inherently neighborhood-based school, is a concern that was raised. And then in terms of traffic, just traffic in that area and lack of public transit. Finally, the consequences of no night school we talked about a little bit. We can talk about more if we want to. And the impact of a decision to pursue MSBA funding is one that we're going to have to consider pretty carefully. And let me just spend a moment on this. The town has currently submitted a statement of interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority to be considered for partnership on the high school project. So we've asked the state to partner with us to fund part of the high school project. They've partnered with us on Runkle and other projects. They're currently partnering with us on Devotion and picking up 25+% of the cost. And so we've asked them to partner with us on the high school. We don't yet know if they will say yes or no. We should find out soon. If they say no, meaning not now, in the next number of weeks, we will need to have a discussion as a town about what we do next. From everything we've heard, although we've never really deliberated this formally, we would probably put that SOI back in, meaning we would want to put the high school back in as our request. I don't think we've heard any support for putting the ninth school in instead of the high school, given the magnitude of the project. But what that means is that it does delay the high school project. It also, if we were to then wait until the high school got funded, hopefully, and then put the ninth school in, we're pushing back the ninth school basically essentially 1 or 2 more years. And so what we're going to have to do as a town is have a discussion about whether we pursue MSBA funding for the 9th elementary school, if this is where we go. And again, there are many reasons not to do it, not least of which is that many other towns are being asked to do some school with multiple projects are being asked to do it on their own as well. So, that's more to come, but that will very significantly impact this timeline. And just so you know, the timeline here assumes that we are not partnering with the MSBA. If we were to do it, you can push these deadlines back a year or 2, and you will start seeing class sizes of the 30s more quickly. So that's the quick summary. What did I miss?
Susan, I just have one thing I want to add, because I think from some emails I've seen there's some confusion. The Stop and Shop site and the TJ Maxx site, we're not talking about taking the property and taking the whole thing and turning it into a school. Because that would have been prohibitively expensive. What the discussion was to share it with the commercial interest. And so you would have the traffic of the people going into whatever the commercial interest was, and the play space for the kids would have been on the roof of the building rather than as it is for all our other schools in a kind of playground setting. And I think that may be why those 2 didn't make it into the final list. So I just want to...
And that was certainly what was proposed by Civic Moxie. I've heard other people in town, and then we may hear it tonight, say what would be the cost of actually making it a dedicated space without those commercial properties taking it wholly. So anyway, we will hear from the people. Anything else?
Okay, so just a couple of logistic items. This room is full, and we have a standing room here. The fifth floor school committee room is available for viewing, for overflow. So if anyone gets tired of standing and wants to continue viewing, the fifth floor is available. Also, there's a monitor out in the hall here. And also, the meeting is being streamed on the internet through Brookline Interactive Group, so you can get to their website. So now we're ready to open this up to public comment. And as Susan mentioned, we have currently over 50 people signed up to speak. And if you do the math, that's a lot of people and a lot of time. And we want to give everybody who wants to speak a chance to speak. So I'm going to announce a 3-minute limit. And I'm going to have a sign here announcing when you have 1 minute remaining, which will give you a chance to start winding down. I'm going to make one exception to the 3-minute rule, and that's to the first speaker who represents the Mass Association for the Blind, since they have one of the properties directly affected. I thought it would be appropriate to give them a little more time. I'd ask everyone to be respectful of the folks behind you and do stick to the 3 minutes. And if you have remarks that go longer than 3 minutes, you can turn those remarks in to Robin Coyne, who can incorporate them into the record. A point I make in all the public hearings I run, if somebody has already made the point that you're trying to make, it's really okay to say that you agree with the prior speaker without completely restating the argument. And so it might be a better use of your time to do that and then go on to another argument. I'm going to call the speakers from the list, and it's generally in the order that you folks signed up. I'm going to call the speaker, and then I'll also announce who's on deck. So whoever's on deck, start coming to the front. Start, please, with your name and address or affiliation, and just be respectful, and let's go. So the first one up is Barbara Salisbury.
Thank you very much. I'm Barbara Salisbury, the Chief Executive Officer of MAB Community Services, and I'm speaking before you today on behalf of MAB's Board of Trustees. I'm joined by Jeff Mullen of Foley Hoag, who's representing us on this issue. We've come to our position after careful consideration of both our mission and the town's legitimate public interest in accommodating a growing student population. Since we too are in the education business, we understand and are greatly sympathetic to the town's need. However, we have concluded that proposal to build a new elementary school for a minimum of 550 students and staff in the Ivy Street School's backyard would have a significantly harmful effect on our operations and therefore oppose it. The proposed use for the site is far too dense to be compatible with the operation of the Ivy Street School, which serves adolescents and young adults with brain injury, autism spectrum disorders, and behavioral health challenges. MAB was founded in 1903, the first social service agency in the country for blind and visually impaired adults. And today, MAB Community Services is the umbrella for 3 major divisions and provides services for the blind and those with cognitive disabilities, brain injuries, and other mental health concerns. In 1976, the Joseph P. Kennedy Foundation bought a large home at the intersection of Ivy Street and Cottage Farm Road, a peaceful yet urban location, to serve as a headquarters for MAB and a haven to deinstitutionalize people with developmental disabilities and return them to a community setting. That was the beginning of MAB's ongoing 40-year history in Cottage Farm. MAB's Cottage Farm facility still serves as the organization's headquarters and also houses its Ivy Street School, a nationally renowned residential and day facility for adolescents and young adults with brain injury, autism spectrum disorders, and behavioral health challenges. The school currently has 41 students, 23 in residence, and 18 commuters. The school serves an important need as its enrollment has doubled in the past 4 years, from 3 classrooms to 6, and we have a long waiting list. Although strong leadership and excellent programs have been key to this growth, the physical facility, setting, and locations have also been extremely important to this mission. The facility is in a dense urban area, but with a bucolic country feel, surrounded by parks and conservation land, and with land of its own for use by its residents, staff, and for possible future growth. We believe this environment is an important part of the students' therapeutic experience. Because MAB has recognized the unique nature of its facility and location, it has strived to maintain an improvement. Yesterday, we celebrated the opening of a new library in Solarian. MAB's board of directors considered a number of negative impacts if an elementary school was located so close to the Ivy Street School building. First was damage to our campus. Families whose children attend our school know their children have access to the amenities and services of a city, but nevertheless are in a peaceful setting. This is an important point of differentiation for the Ivy Street School and would be lost if a large urban school were erected next door. Second, loss of outdoor space for students. And I want to draw your attention now to these blown up photographs of our students using our outdoor space. The Ivy Street School is at full current capacity. Our students have always had the use of our outdoor campus. Students participate in many outdoor activities in a sheltered, private, non-threatening area. Outdoor activities are valuable for the behavioral management of students and for their well-being. Third, loss of opportunity for our own expansion. Our land gives us options for future expansion, most immediately including the option to use a 1/4 acre of our property to expand our transition programs and build supported housing for young adults who lose state services when they turn 22. And finally, the loss of the use of our property for administrative staff. Our property currently is being used by our employees for parking and other uses. Also want to talk about the addition of an extremely active facility in a quiet area. The proposal would...
Five minutes have gone by.
Okay, now then, let me just read the final piece, which is, in summary, we deeply sympathize with the committee's urgent need to site a 9th elementary school. We have great respect for the committee members and the process they're going through to site a new school, and we wish we could be more accommodating, as it would be an opportunity to partner more closely with the town. But the MAB board has determined that the proposal to build a new elementary school in the Ivy Street School's backyard would have a significant harmful effect on our students, on our operations, and potentially on our future, and we therefore oppose it. Thank you.
Next up is U Madison, and on deck is Kathleen Cavell.
Hugh Madison, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 5. The Civic Moxie report listed certain criteria. I'll just point to them. That up here. There you go. Up here. These are the Civic Moxie criteria that were listed. I have added 5 more criteria down at the bottom, which may have been included in Civic Moxie, but which deserve emphasis. We need to use smart growth principles and be flexible in site selection if we want to protect open space and our quality of life and provide outdoor play space for an increasing population of children. I think the school needs in South Brookline cannot be solved in North Brookline, so I am only dealing with the possible North Brookline site. The Webster Street site, this is on Webster, Kent. Webster Street site, which is in here, is identified as sites 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3 in the Civic Moxie report, and that was in here. That's right in here. Plus 32 Kent Street, which is a small office building right there, which I've added, which is in the same cluster of lots, is centrally located, a reasonable distance from existing schools in Brookline's densest neighborhoods, and near public transit, over in here, there's your green line, near the Green Line, Riverside Line, and 2 bus routes on Harvard Street. Other nearby sites are shown in black circles. That's these sites here that we're being talked about. The Webster Kent site would consolidate 20 and 32 Kent Street, 20 Webster Place, and a small Kent Street parking lot. The size and assessed value of the 4 Civic Moxie sites plus Webster Kent are shown in the table up in here. The table at the bottom, down here, shows the 4 lots in my expanded Webster Kent site. This site in here is where I'm talking. That's where the school would be located. It's a small 1.7 acres, which is less than the 2 acres that was identified as desirable. It's a compact school design. Much of the existing sites are devoted to parking right now, as many of you know. The new 3-story school building would straddle Webster Place, which is right here, with the east end, a dead end, which is down in here, and the west end accessed by a turn from Harvard Street onto Webster Place, which would be here.
3 minutes have gone by, Mr. Madison.
Thank you. Parking underground or under an overhang might be possible. The need for parking might also impact parking for the commercial area. A 4,200 square foot or 70 by 60 play area for younger children would be in the parking area on Webster Place. This is approximately the same size as the area at Robinson Playground.
Give your written material to Robin, and we will look at it, but we need to let some of the other speakers.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Cavell, and after that is Beth Boucher.
Hi, thank you. I am Kathleen Cavell. I'm a town meeting member for Precinct 1, and I'm speaking on behalf of 12 of the 15 town meeting members in our delegation. I want to particularly address the Cottage Farm school site, but I want to speak at the end, if my 3 minutes will allow, about a vision for perhaps how to think about a school site. We have previously forwarded to all of you correspondence from our neighbors, from our constituents, and I hope that's part of the public record. We have, as a delegation, grave doubts that a 2/3 vote at town meeting would be received by, would be available for the Cottage Farm site. And here are some reasons. There are people in the neighborhood who think it might be just fine, or are open to the idea, including some of our fellow town meeting members. However, there's been a very, very clear and strong opposition by our neighbors and by abutters and by the people who live in Precinct 1. We're all aware of it. You are aware of it if you've looked at the correspondence that you've gotten. We feel the residential density of our neighborhood is so high, without child density being that high, because this is a neighborhood that houses students, young adults, seniors in high-rise apartments. This type of living arrangement is completely dependent on park use. And Amory Park is the centerpiece of the particular living arrangements in our neighborhood. Further, the development on Commonwealth Avenue and further east on Beacon across the Boston line is highly paved. There isn't an inch of green. In fact, this space, Amory Woods, and the space you would be taking for the Cottage Farm School is the last big open air until you reach the Boston Common. And compared to South Brookline in particular, there are neither single-family yards nor green spaces in the form of big lawns or of colleges or golf courses or farms or anything that allows the area to breathe. Thank you. If this is the site choice, town meeting will be asked to approve it, knowing that by the time the school is built, we will have outgrown the site itself. Since it's a 3-section school, possibly 3.5 sections, we'll need a 4-section school by the time the school is built. I just want to say a couple of words before my 3 minutes are up about NIMBY. This is not NIMBY. This is not a sewage treatment plant we're talking about. We're not talking about a prison. We're talking about a school. Brookline loves schools. And our neighborhood is no exception. We love schools too. But we'd like a school at a proper school site, and it would be welcomed by all of us. We're asking you, as the decision makers, to be visionaries. We're asking you to think about this from the perspective of 50 years from now, when destroying old growth trees and paving over precious green space won't even be an option. We want to ask you to make a creative use of existing buildings, perhaps Pine Manor, perhaps Stop and Shop, perhaps TJ Maxx, but that will be the obvious choice in 50 years, and we want you to make that choice now. Thank you.
And after Beth is Janie Gilman.
Good evening. I'm Beth Boucher. I live at 238 Russet Road. Our son is in 1st grade at Baker. It is also my husband's birthday. He's putting our son to bed. So, tonight I'm speaking on behalf of 333 of my neighbors who with me have signed the following petition. We, the undersigned residents of South Brookline, stand together in support of the building of a 9th elementary school in our rapidly growing neighborhood. We believe that South Brookline is the most effective location for a 9th school because, according to Civic Moxie's report, Baker School is by far the most acutely overcrowded of the K-8 schools in our system, at 113 students over capacity. The next most crowded school is 21 students over capacity. South Brookline has by far the most planned housing in town, with 330 bedrooms at Hancock Village in the pipeline. The town predicts this will add 130 more students to our school system. If elementary school capacity is not added in our neighborhood, but is added elsewhere, South Brookline will be forced to export at least 220 of our children to completely different neighborhoods. This would mean driving or busing students unprecedented distances away from their homes. Trying to redistrict South Brookline out of its problem would be unreasonable and inequitable and would violate the town's fundamental promise of neighborhood schools. Neighborhood schools are about community connection. Neighborhood schools foster bonds among students, parents, and teachers. Neighborhood schools allow students and families to join activities and access resources. A neighborhood school teaches children that the place where they learn is at the heart of their community, not remote from it. We believe that a new neighborhood school in South Brookline would relieve system-wide enrollment pressure, and because of the availability of space in our community, could potentially offer additional multi-purpose benefits, such as dedicated BEAT classrooms, townwide athletic fields. While the status of Larz Anderson needs to be fully understood as a site, we're asking town representatives to consider any other potentially viable sites in South Brookline. We urge town officials to maintain Brookline's promise of neighborhood schools and situate a new school in our neighborhood. We're saying yes in South Brookline, yes.
Ms. Gilman? And next up is Kate Silva.
Jane Gilman, Precinct 3, co-founder and co-chair of Brookline Town Meeting Green Caucus, but speaking for myself. Here's why I'm opposed to taking any open space. We've received conclusions from 2 recent studies regarding where to site a new school. On page 28, the Civic Moxie report provides Town parks and open spaces are important public assets for the community. The team assessed whether there were any reasonable site alternatives to using open space parcels and chose other sites in all cases. B-Space report recommendation number 3 was for a, quote, strategic expansion of a number of existing neighborhood schools. What happened to expand in place? B-Space further recommended not to use either Amory Park, which lies in a floodplain, or Larz Anderson, to which there is no public transportation. Given these recommendations, the public would like to know how the only 2 open space sites made it to the top of the list, despite consultants' advice to the contrary. Our open space became, quote, an asset held hostage pending a decision on where to build a school. We should take open space off any list of potential development sites and protect all of them equally. They are not vacant lots. They are not strategic assets, and they are not a commodity to be exploited. They belong to the community. We are at the beginning stages of a planetary crisis, and given the alternatives, capturing open space is abhorrent. Every taking of open space reduces the capacity to absorb greenhouse gases. Open space isn't merely a lovely area. It is a requirement for sustainability. The fact is, our lives right now and forever depend upon the natural world. Civic Moxie was given these site criteria. Quote, minimize walking distance, defined as a whopping 1/4 mile, and model existing schools to include traditional siting of playground and field space. But yesterday's criteria are appropriate only to yesterday. Today, Brookline has a modern urban problem, and we need a modern, appropriate, smart urban solution. Town leaders appear to be motivated by expediency and finances. But in addition to a single pot of money, we also share a single environment. Selectman Wyszynski recently signed the Commonwealth Community Compact, formalizing Brookline's commitment to climate change mitigation and adaptation. The plan is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to climate change through, quote, mixed-use growth and travel by multiple modes to reduce emissions.
3 minutes
Compact
have
provides
gone by.
that citizens of Massachusetts are right to expect forward-thinking, innovative government from both the Commonwealth and local government. Building great schools and protecting the environment are not
Please
mutually
conclude.
exclusive. We look to our selectmen and the school committee to make decisions that stabilize, not degrade our environment. Going forward, Brookline should direct
Please
all of its
conclude.
consultants with appropriate one-sentence criteria to promote sustainability, encourage smart growth, and to ensure transit-oriented projects. All of open space is my backyard. Don't build in my backyard. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to remind everyone that we're not asking you to conclude because we want to be rude. What we do is we want to be respectful to everyone else who is patiently waiting their turn. So please, when we say wrap up, please wrap up. Not for us, but to be respectful to everyone who's waiting. Thank you.
Kate Silva, town meeting
Bettina, you're finished.
town meeting member, Precinct 1, professor of law at Boston University. I want to speak about the 4 sites that involve eminent domain and also the Hancock Village eminent domain question pending. So I'm here to really make 2 requests. Microphone. I'm here to make 2 requests. One is for the selectmen to please appoint an independent committee to generate guidance on appropriate evaluation process for the use of eminent domain. And you can do this without slowing the site selection process. The creation of a guidance can run concurrently, but it should be complete in advance of asking town meeting to vote on the 9th school taking. And then the second request for both boards is please thoroughly vet the publicly owned sites. They are the sure thing here, though other sites might work. I completely agree. And that the success of a taking at town meeting is likely to depend on an honest claim that the town-owned sites were equally vetted and found unworkable or substantially less ideal according to clearly articulated standards. Eminent domain is the taking of private property by threat of force and without consent, but with offsetting payment. It's considered one of the most significant exercises of government power. Agreements reached privately with targets of eminent domain are not like other land purchase agreements. Bargaining for consent from someone whose consent you don't need can't be sugarcoated as a friendly consent. Cities can elide that distinction between force and consent, but practically speaking, you can't. Both because the public deliberation is this Brookline value, but also structurally because of town meeting. You're not going to be able to avoid a public justification process for any eminent domain site, and you're dangerously postponing it. If any of us, all of us, want eminent domain sites to be successful, the public should know the standards you apply to this use of force and see visible reflection on values expressed through some standards. Yeah, that's a challenge when price discussions are happening, so your lawyers have told you to stay quiet. But it's a challenge that's embedded in the Brookline system, and it probably explains why town meeting jurisdictions in Massachusetts have fewer takings by eminent domain, and Brookline has gone 40 years without one. This town lacks experience melding the confidentiality around eminent domain with our public processes. So everyone here understands Brookline has no articulated standards for what must or will be considered in deciding to execute on a taking. The power has been dormant here. So there are 5 random data points that I've drawn from Brookline governance sources that hint at Brookline principles for responsible use. They're not coordinated. The first is this 40 years without using it. The second is that 2005 town meeting vote after the Supreme Court decided Kelo, which is an actual guidance disfavoring it, but for commercial sites, and that's not this situation. Site-specific Article 15 aimed at Hancock Village, but again, it's ad hoc because it's site-specific. And then several of you have given a we shouldn't take houses gut check, which is a decent instinct, but it's certainly not a standard or a guidance. And then finally, the RFP and the Civic Moxie report, which appear to give private landowners no special regard over public sites, a guidance and standards for evaluating appropriate use of eminent domain that consider the nature of current ownership, the nature of the parcel, the nature of current use, holdout problems, questions related to parcel assembly. We need these things in order to produce deliberations that will both give us ethical outcomes and make it possible within this town's governance system to execute on eminent domain. There's been too much ad hoc and uncareful conversation about it. Please appoint a committee.
Yes.
And next up after Bettina is Susan DeLong.
My name is Bettina Neuefeind. I'm a resident of 20 Amory Street. I'm a research fellow at Harvard Law School. I'm a parent to 3 Lawrence students, a town meeting member for Precinct 1, and a member of the Green Coalition. I speak tonight wearing many hats, and of course my words are my own. I don't speak for anyone else. I've been struck in observing this whole process that it's been lost in the fray that Brookline right now has a huge opportunity to demonstrate vision and leadership that is both pro-school and pro-environment by developing a green, sustainable demonstration school that increases the aggregate green space of the town. I think this process would be really well served by creating momentum around a school site that will add substantial value to a space that is currently underutilized, as opposed to removing or diminishing existing green space by that or any other name. And I think that this sort of vision can be brought from many quarters, but one idea that I think has been percolating, but I think that really should be put into effect, is having a design competition that would put an actual vision on the table that people could see what a sustainable urban school could look like and what green spaces in constructed places can look like, how you can turn a parking lot into something that is a high-rise green space. And there are many examples of schools like this, and I believe Alan Christ is submitting a number of images to both the Board of Selectmen and to the school committee. And I would urge you to take them very seriously and to consider launching a design competition, whether or not site-specific to any of the existing sites, or whether you leave it to the architects and designers to propose a site that they would have a particular vision for. So that when it comes fall 2016, you have really a range of visionary ideas to choose from to pursue deeply. I live at 20 Amory Street across from Amory Park, Amory Playground. So I want to speak with that hat on for just a moment, which is I think the concerns of the abutters here are important to listen to, not because the abutters have a vested interest in having their own park, but because they have more nuanced understanding of what the issues are around using that particular park as a schoolyard, which is that park currently has sort of the right amount of use to allow it to be maintained. So that's maybe 100, 200 intermittent users in the course of the day who are apartment and condo dwellers, people, students, people who have no dedicated green space. They don't have yards, and they come and they do Tai Chi there, they do walk their dogs there, they do exercise routines, they meditate. And if you actually had 400 or 500 children there every day, it is a marshy, muddy lawn. And it is closed as it is twice as often as other fields in the town. And it simply would not support, I think, the type of use that a schoolyard would require. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan DeLong, and after Susan is Bob Schramm.
Susan DeLong, 3 Worthington Road, former town meeting member from Precinct 1 and a member of the Cottage Farm Neighborhood Association Executive Board for 35 years. My remarks tonight focus on preservation issues related to building a 9th elementary school on Amory Street in the Cottage Farm Local Historic District. In the early 1970s, if neighborhood groups and political activists, including then State Rep. Michael Dukakis, had not worked together to derail the proposed 6-lane Interbelt Highway, there would be no Cottage Farm neighborhood today. Likewise, if town meeting had not acted to create the town's first local historic district in 1979 in response to the middle-of-the-night teardown of the house built in 1853 at 37 Lenox Street, many more of our neighborhood houses would likely have been lost by now. While a new Brookline Public School has a wonderful mission, so have most of the other institutions that have sought to develop the neighborhood, including schools and hospitals. Cottage Farm's location, tucked in the corner where Boston, Brookline, and Cambridge meet, squeezed between Commonwealth Avenue to the north and Beacon Street to the south, makes it highly desirable for commercial and institutional use. That it has remained residential with a diverse mix of single-family historic homes, homes to public housing developments, high and low-rise apartment and condo buildings, is thanks to historical preservation being a priority of the town of Brookline. This brings us to the proposal for the siting of the 9th Elementary School on Amory Street. At its meeting on November 10th, the Preservation Commission offered its initial impressions of the Cottage Farm school site. With no detailed drawings or schematics to consider, the commissioners could not say definitively whether it would be possible to build a school on this site. What they could say, however, was that no houses should be torn down, that the mass of a 100,000 square foot building on such a small lot would be oversized, that the footprint would need to be moved back from the homes on Mason Square, and that the height of the building should not exceed those on Nimitz Square, which could make a viable 3-story design unlikely. The Commission's official guidelines on any new construction clearly state that, quote, new construction should respect the existing historic streetscape, and that the historic relationship of buildings to the street, including setbacks and open spaces, should be maintained. They noted that the overall proposal would mark a dramatic change, which is exactly what the Preservation Commission protects against. The loss of the green belt of trees between Amory Street and Mason Square, replaced by an institutional building looming behind the stately White House at 10 Cottage Farm Road, would change the appearance and character of the heart of the historic district in a decidedly negative way.
3 minutes.
What?
3 minutes.
Oh, okay. The proposed Amory Street site for a new school could present insurmountable siting and design problems, as well as zoning issues, and I urge the town to consider that in your deliberations.
Thank you. Bob Schramm, and then Adrian Bowman is after Bob.
Okay, this is going to be quick. I'm Bob Schramm. I'm a Precinct 1 town meeting member. I live at 47 Monmouth Street, Green Caucus, Friends of Falls Pond, green space, all that kind of stuff. All of what Bettina, Jane, Kathleen, Susan, DeLong, and Kate said but I agree with him, so I don't have to repeat it.
Thank you.
We just have to stop thinking in terms of least worst cases. We have to start thinking big. We have to stop thinking in terms of paths of least resistance. Whatever we decide must be accretive to our town's precious green and recreational space. Build something we will be intensely proud of 50 years from now. Create new community hubs that will anchor and promote smart development in our central corridors and our key spots in Brookline that need the redevelopment. We're going to spend a lot of money. Take the time and do it right. Thank you very much.
And after Adrian is Atsadeki.
Good evening, Town Selectmen and committee members and fellow residents. My name is Adrian Bowman, and I'm a long-term resident of South Brookline. I grew up in South Brookline. I currently live at 416 VFW Parkway. I proudly went to Baker when it was a 2-section elementary school, and then I went to BHS. And my excellent public education in Brookline is what led me to become a teacher myself. After I lived in New York City, I moved back to Boston to teach, and when I had children of my own, I decided to move back to Brookline because of the schools. And on a teacher's salary, South Brookline was my best option, and my husband and I bought the most affordable house on the market when we did in South Brookline. But I was very happy to know that my 2 small children, age 4 and 15 months, would be going to Baker. We were immediately welcomed into the close-knit community of young families that South Brookline is. But my story is not unique. South Brookline is rapidly turning over to young families like my own, which means more children going to the public schools, namely Baker, which is already bursting at the seams. For many young families, South Brookline is the only somewhat affordable option to buy a single-family house. When I started teaching in Boston, students were bused far from their neighborhoods on a daily basis. We do not want that for Brookline students. One of the values of our great town is the idea of neighborhood schools. In fact, quoting the Civic Moxie report, the ultimate goal is to minimize the extent and impact of redistricting. South Brookline is in danger of becoming the only area of town without a neighborhood school for a large swath of its residents. We understand that the Civic Moxie redistricting maps are drafts, and we're told that they can be tweaked once a site is determined. But they cannot be tweaked out of what they make fundamentally clear, that unless we build capacity in South Brookline, hundreds of our students, many of whom now live within walking distance of a neighborhood school, will be siphoned off. South Brookline, which already is geographically removed from the center of town, should not be the only area of Brookline where the promise of neighborhood schools is broken. There is no way to maintain this core value until a school is built in South Brookline. The need for a night school in South Brookline is dire. Taking a long-term view, it's even greater. As the town's 2010 open space plan report states, Brookline is near build-out. Most of the potentially subdividable parcels that remain are located in the southern part of town. The growth is already happening. In my backyard, there is a lot that's being divided into 2 houses. In my parents' backyard, it's happening twice on their road. As more and more development comes to South Brookline, and it will, because that's where the space is, more and more families will come, which means more and more children will come. The upside is that we do have plenty of space in South Brookline, plenty of options, and we are asking you to reconsider them, re-examine them. And South Brookline is saying yes, resoundingly so, even with the Thanksgiving holiday.
3 minutes.
Even with the Thanksgiving holiday, more than 330 neighbors have signed a petition saying, bring a school to South Brookline. We don't want to be the 10th elementary school. We need to be the 9th. South Brookline says yes.
I just noticed that Mr. Sadecki didn't check the.
Mr. Chairman, I think it is striking that South.
Can you come to the microphone? Sorry.
Absadegi, 125 Arlington Road, town meeting member from Precinct 15. I'm going to be very brief. I think it's striking that South Brookline, everybody says yes, and North Brookline, for obvious reasons, they say no. I would suggest going back to the planning stage, look at other sites, in that there are lots of space in South Brookline that has seemingly been ignored. I'm a little bit concerned that our consultants, our paid consultants, have chosen for top choice 2 sites that had obvious problems, and looking a little bit deeper would have uncovered these problems. Please go back and remember that school is going to be forever. As many people have mentioned, we're planning for the next 30, 40, 50 years, not for tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew Shallot. Andrew Shallot, and after... Okay. Bruce Wolf, and after Bruce is Deborah Ruptopoulos. Bruce left. Deborah Ruptopoulos. And after Ms. Ruptopoulos, Susan Williams.
My name is Deborah Raptopoulos. We live at 190 Ivy Street. We live next door to MAP Community Services. We live behind Hall's Pond, and I'm in the Cottage Farm Neighborhood Association, and I'm on the boards of those 3 organizations. I agree with everything everybody has said around the preservation, conservation, traffic, engineering issues involved with choosing the Cottage Farm site. The only thing I'd like to add is that I went outside the other day and I went to the land that you're hoping to annex, and I counted that there was 46 trees that were at least 200 years old that were going to be taken down, and I counted about 160 trees that looked at least 100 years old. So, that is part of the construction. The other thing is that behind our home, if you're familiar with that site, is a gazebo. And that gazebo used to be owned by the builders of our house in 1919. And that piece of property, which is now Amory Woods, was taken by eminent domain in the late 80s to provide the town what is now Amory Woods. And the reason that they had given to take this land from MAB, essentially, was to provide a handicapped entrance to a nature preserve. So it was a very honorable green effort by the town. So I'm suggesting to you that if you want to take any more land of our neighborhood, I suggest you take it for green purposes. That seems to be the legacy in your history, and I hope that it's the legacy in the future.
Susan Williams, and after Ms. Williams, Julie Jett.
Susan Williams, 35 Prescott Street. I'm going to address sort of again the size of the parcel, and first ask that there be a clear decision of what the kids are going to need. Whether they need a 3-section school in North Brookline. Do they need a 4-section school in North Brookline? Do they need a 3 or 4 section in South Brookline? Do they need a new high school, a second high school? Is the need set in stone, or is it still changing? And before any decision is made, particularly one that involves taking private property, these questions should be publicly discussed and a clear answer made. If the need is for just a 3-section school, then the question is, how does the Amory Street site measure up? And well, it's completely understandable that no building design can be done before a parcel is chosen. You really have to look at whether whatever you're going to need is going to fit on the site. And the Cottage Farm parcel doesn't meet the minimum size requirements that were set out originally for a 3-section school, and it doesn't have flexibility to expand if during the design phase it becomes clear that a bigger school is necessary. So what were the town's original criteria? It was 3.5 acres for a standalone school, or a minimum target size for a school adjacent to an existing town playground of 2.5 acres with a range of 2.5 to 5. So then how does this site, the Cottage Farm site, measure up? The original parcel discussed by Civic Moxie contained both the Ivy Street School and the Boston University land, including the White House at 10 Cottage Farm Road. That combination is 3.8 acres and allows for a drop-off on Mason Square, so that would not have been an unreasonable thing to look at. However, that's changed, as I understand it, from what Susan DeLong has said, and I've heard elsewhere, that Preservation Commission would not look favorably on tearing down the houses on Mason Square. And so there would be no access for pickup and drop-off on that side. And the parcel is now down to only 2.37 acres, which is below the 2.5 that's set out originally as the minimum criteria. But the parcel is even effectively smaller than that because it isn't really adjacent to Amory Playground. The playground is, of course, nearby, but because it's not right next door, the plans seem to have a K through 2 playground, which means that the actual site for the school is even smaller. And finally, that size would not sufficiently take care of the parking needs of the school. I think the Civic Moxie indicated that that site might be able to have 60 spaces plus the Mass Association for the Blind spaces. But right now, Lawrence, which is a 4-section school, has 102 on-street parking permits, I believe. So even if you took out, say, 9 spaces for teachers and even, say, 8 for attendant needs, that's still 25 more spaces than would be able to be built on this site as conceived by the study.
3 minutes have gone by.
All right. So trying to build on the small site is not the best the town can do, and the site should not be pursued as the best or even an adequate example of the site plan restriction.
Julie Jett, and after Julie is Michelle Morrissey.
I'll see my turn, Michelle.
Okay.
Hi. Can you hear me? So my name is Michelle Morrissey. I live at 363 South Street. My daughter Sonali is in the 1st grade at the Baker School, and my son Kieran is 3. And I am here with the group of parents who have organized to support building the night school in South Brookline. I want to present a little more detail on the situation that we're actually facing in South Brookline. And the last speaker mentioned the need for some information on population, and I've gathered some for South Brookline, and I'd like to share it with you guys, particularly if you're not familiar with our situation. So according to the Civic Moxie report, with 816 students, the Baker School is 116 students over its capacity. We know, with all due respect to those who are still fighting the development, that we will likely have an additional 130 students arriving from a Hancock Village expansion in our community, bringing the immediate Baker School population to 950 students. Additionally, through the large buffer zones that have been carved out of the traditional Baker district, we are already sending 100 students north into Lincoln and Heath. So that's a total population of around 1,050 seats just for the traditional Baker School district. Additionally, and I don't have great figures on this and I would love to get them, we think that there's at least 150 other students across the greater South Brookline area for a total aggregate demand in South Brookline of around 1,200 students. And that only looks at the Baker School expansion, and it doesn't include any potential other enrollment growth, which we know is actually likely to happen. So I have 2 points here. One is that there is aggregate demand of at least 1,200 kids in South Brookline, coming especially with the potential, but likely, expansion in Hancock Village, and one school with a maximum capacity of 700. My second point is this: there are no other schools in our area. While the other 7 schools in Brookline are all situated within 2.5 miles of each other, the Baker School is the only school serving our area, and it is 2.8 miles away from the closest elementary school. If the town decides not to build a school in South Brookline, then it is in effect choosing to bring hundreds of our children from South Brookline north to schools 3 miles away or further. Fundamentally, as Adrian said, breaking the promise of neighborhood schools in Brookline, but only for one community. The consequences of this for our community and for our children, we genuinely find heartbreaking. But it's not just good for us to build a school in South Brookline. It will benefit the entire system. Instead of sending hundreds of our children north and putting stress and pressure on the schools there, and frankly, let's not forget our already congested roads, a school in South Brookline will keep the students in their neighborhoods and pull children back into the neighborhood, relieving pressure across the system. We understand that all the schools in Brookline are under significant enrollment pressures. And we know that the choices you have to make are difficult, but we also strongly believe that the town cannot successfully address the problem of enrollment in Brookline if it does not address the problem in South Brookline. I want to close by quoting the budget message from last year that turned to the override that we voted and supported for. Ensuring that our schools are easily accessible for most families is a critical component of our success. Parents choose Brookline in part because of its neighborhood schools, and communities revolve around the school at its core. We are committed to maintaining our community-based elementary school structure. So in closing, again, we are here to say that we want to maintain that promise for all neighborhoods in Brookline, and again, yes to a night school in South Brookline. Thank you.
Jen Roberts is next. Jen Roberts, okay.
Clarice
No. This one.
Stu Rubino?
And after Stu is Charlotte Mao.
I'm actually here as a proxy to read from a statement by Dr. Rafi Dar-Sarkisian of 1128 Beacon Street, who wants to offer firsthand experience with engineering and construction challenges in the Cottage Farm's Amory Park area. Many of the homes and other structures in the area have been and continue to be subject to damage from the poor substrate upon which they've been built. Specifically, there are issues with water penetration due to a relatively high water table in the area and settling of structures with resultant compromise of foundations and load-bearing support structures. Drainage has always been a challenge in the area given the fact that it was originally wetlands that was backfilled. The underlying water has created significant problems in Amory Park, which is frequently waterlogged and has created water penetration problems with homes in the area. It's likely that any new structure in the area, as proposed, would require excavation down to and below the level of the water table, with further compromise of drainage patterns and the potential for instability in the foundation and structure of such a building. It would seem building on what was previously a marsh would involve higher initial costs of design, engineering, and construction, as well as subjecting the structure to more significant maintenance and repair costs. The poor construction substrate issue is one we have personal experience with in the area. We purchased a home abutting Amory Park approximately 5 years ago, and upon inspection, the foundation was unsafe to support the structure of the home based on the poor density of the land upon which it was built. Several homes in the area had in fact been condemned and demolished because of the issue. We sought out engineering data to save the house. It was found that the poor building substrate, primarily peat, sand, and backfill, mostly from fireplace ash, extended down 40+ feet. This required placement of helical piers bored down to approximately 65 feet in order to hit earth solid enough to support the structure. Further investigation revealed the entire area in and around Amory Park and Cottage Farm has the same land composition. Building on this poor foundational material could very well result in a structure that is subject to settling, water penetration, potential instability, and significantly higher maintenance costs. In summary, it seems a location for a new school is being sought without first determining if such a location would be appropriate from a practical perspective. It would be a shame to go through this entire process, identify a location, only to find the structure cannot be built there because of engineering, cost of construction, maintenance, and conservation issues. I would ask the committee to consider other sites that have a better-known building track record and would potentially be safer, less costly to build and maintain, and not be subjected to the environmental variables known at the Amory site.
Charlotte now, and Frank Caro is next. Frank? Is Frank here? Let me see.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Mao. I live at 35 Crown and Shield. I'm a resident of Far North Brookline and a parent of 3 current or former DeVos students. And I want to talk tonight about why I feel Cottage Farm is an irrational choice for a 9th school, especially in the context of DeVos mega expansion. And then at the end, comment about what I think would be good sites. I want to emphasize the negative impact of such a choice on Far North Brookline, which has already, if you want to say, sacrificed for the greater good of the town in agreeing to make us a mega school of 1,000 students, a decision that we did not like but agreed to without divisive dispute because we felt the town was in a real bind. The plan at that time was expand in place, and we were desperate for renovation as well. By a ripple effect, there is in fact a negative impact on the whole town due to what I think is illogical redistricting that will be necessary if a 9th school is built in the far northeast periphery of town in an area where in fact there is not density around Cottage Farm, and when expand in place has already happened at the 2 adjacent schools, Devo and Lawrence. I'm against Cottage Farm definitely for all the green space issues mentioned, but those have been thoroughly addressed, and perhaps even more so, I think you cannot fill a school at that site without irrational redistricting and inequitable demographics. At the public open houses, but not contained within the Civic Moxie report, is a map of, it looks like this, a map of existing enrollment and future development that shows different colored triangles for households with 1 or more students currently enrolled in the 8 existing schools, and each school with a different colored circle drawn around the school indicating the quarter-mile radius of walkability. There is notably a blank spot, pretty much void of triangles, at the Cottage Farm site. To fill that school, you need to go deep into Devo and Lawrence territories. It's illogical, highly disruptive. I would say disruptive even isn't a strong enough word, invasive maybe, given that Devo is being expanded to a 1,000-person school, and Lawrence also has expanded in place with modulars. Specifically, areas that would be considered firmly in Devo territory, including the north side of Manchester Street, Abbotsford, Osborne, the northern ends of Naples, Coolidge, Thorndike, and in fact Lawton Street going all the way to Harvard Ave would become the Cottage Farm district. You're basically taking for Cottage Farm large areas that are at or maybe just beyond the quarter-mile radius to Devo, yet still very naturally in Devo's catchment. I can't imagine anyone who knows our neighborhood who would argue with this. And some of those kids will have to walk more than twice as far to get to Cottage Farm, which decidedly does not feel a part of their neighborhood. With so many of Devo and Lawrence's students going to Cottage Farm, those 2 schools then need to go far in the opposite directions into territories of other schools to maintain capacity.
Please conclude.
Okay, so just as an example, some examples. The western section of current Pierce District around Briggs Park, and even on an area on the south side of Washington Street.
You can provide the written comments.
Okay, around Gardner Road becomes Devo. I'm sending you all, as well as town meeting and the tab, a letter where I'll detail my concerns.
We're delighted to report that emails have unlimited word count, so please go.
May I ask your patience with a request? Given that this is the first chance the public has had to offer comments in a setting like this, would you consider a second session so that all of us could be heard?
Yeah, well, why don't we finish where we are, and we'll see where we are.
Just a really quick comment to that.
No, not now. I'm sorry. Please. No. Please. No. This is not. This really is not respectful. Please sit down. This is not respectful of everyone else. Please sit down. We
Thank
support
you.
her speaking up. Go ahead, Mr. Carroll.
Mr. Caro, and after Mr. Caro is Merrill Lease, if she wishes to speak.
Hi, I'm Frank Caro. Earlier today, I submitted a written statement on behalf of the Friends of Halls Pond. I'm the co-president of that organization currently, and I'm not going to read that statement. I can just say in a nutshell that the Friends of Halls Pond would prefer that the school be located elsewhere. And no need to go through that. But on the other hand, the Friends of Halls Pond do recognize that the Halls Pond is a valued resource for the town. Among other things, serves educational purposes, and in fact would welcome some well-developed plan to collaborate with the schools on environmental education. I wanted to just make a comment kind of briefly for myself. We, kind of hearing a lot of things this evening indicating there's enthusiasm for the school in South Brookline, and that a lot of people speaking against the school in Cottage Farm. I want to just say a word kind of briefly about the importance of consideration of a school in North Brookline. One of the merits of North Brookline is its high density. I think density brings walkability. People like to live in North Brookline because everything is close at hand. It's more challenging to find a site in North Brookline because it is so packed. But if a site can be found there, it's also a site where it's really feasible for children to get back and forth to school on foot. And I should say there is an enormous amount of evidence now that children are healthier when they walk back and forth to school. So there's a whole lot to be said for building the school where people are, where people want to be, and making it possible to walk. Thank you.
Thank you. Merrill Lease passed, or
I'll cede part of my time to Charlotte so she can finish.
but Charlotte is not up. It's Mariah Nobrega.
She can't cede some of her time to me?
No.
Why not? No.
Charlotte, I need your paper.
Mr. Chairman, can I add regarding the statement of Mr. Carroll? I thought it was very well written and thoughtful, and it was the type of even-handed statement that I appreciated, and therefore it was very persuasive. So I would hope that other statements take that type of a balanced approach to the issues that we're confronting.
Merrill Lease.
My name is Marilee. I live on White Place in North Brookline. I'm a town meeting member for Precinct 6. The report notes that in some cases assignments of modeled students were balanced in order to take into account significant geographical features impacting walkability, as well as to approximate the current distribution of out-of-district students and students eligible for reduced free lunch. This would reportedly have 22% reduced free lunch compared to current maximums of 19% in any single school. This figure of 22% is the second highest of 6 sites, Isabel being the highest at 23%. But as it was earlier described, it requires completely irrational redistricting, forcing kids who are just close to a quarter of a mile from Devo to walk more than twice as far to Cottage Farm to create that figure of 22%. I would agree with Charlotte that issues of diversity and equity are important in all of our schools and among all of the different schools. And the Cottage Farm School cannot achieve those criteria.
Thank you. Mariah Nobrega, and after Mariah is Barbara Wilhelm.
Can you hear me? Okay. No? Is that better? Okay. My name is Mariah Nobrega. I live at 33 Bowker Street. I grew up in Brookline. I went to school with Adrian, who spoke earlier, and I definitely see other familiar faces around the room. I live at, I think I said 33 Bowker Street, parent to 2 kids at Pierce, PTO treasurer, town meeting member, advisory committee member, and I was active on the override this past spring as a captain for Precinct 4 and a co-captain for Pierce. And I, of course, have a lot of remarks here, but I think I'm going to go off script for 1 second, because one of the things that I've heard, not here, but I'm hearing tonight too, is how positive South Brookline is for a school. And I want to say that we in North Brookline are positive for a school too, but I recognize and I hear the challenges that are happening in South Brookline, and I and many other people are saying, why can't we have 2 schools? We have such a crunch right now. I know it's a money issue, but over and over again we have, we have to figure out something here, because there is a real issue in South Brookline and a real issue in North Brookline that we need to address. And what I hear over and over again is one school isn't going to fix the problem. I submitted written comments before in favor of Stop and Shop, and I won't get into that too much now. But what I want to say is that as a parent, I'm excited to see how we can work together with the people who are in favor of green and open space. I happen to be both of those things, but we need to make sure that we're not dividing the community. So when I look at the prioritization of Larz Anderson and Amory, the obvious problem with them is that anyone who cares about green and open space is going to be against them. And we just saw that when we went through town meeting with Article 6. So I think that we need to do all that we can to minimize the barriers to acceptance that this ninth school is going to have. Obviously, those spaces are a problem. Places like Stop and Shop, which could be amazing if it was redeveloped right. I heard some comments from, I think it was Bettina earlier, about the leadership that could, and the vision that a real amazing redevelopment of a site could give us. And I am so in favor of that. And I really hope that you will push, whether it's within the 6 sites that we've got, whether it's Stop and Shop, whether it's not even within the 26 sites, but that we look for something that's going to allow us to have something visionary to show, whether it's the town, the state, the rest of the country, how we can find and make a school happen that's going to adhere to Brookline Public Schools' core values of educational equity and excellence, allow us to do an expand in place model as we need to going forward, which, as we've heard, many of these sites that are in the 6 will not allow us to do, so we need to make sure that that happens. And last but not least, Brookline's commitment to open space, the environment, and a vibrant, well-planned community. Thank you.
Barbara Wilhelm, and after Barbara is Lori Janelli.
Much of what I had planned to say has already been said, but I'm Barbara Wilhelm, and I live at 123 Freeman Street. And I had planned to talk about a lot of the known conditions that are relevant to the Cottage Farm area, because I live in that area. What I had planned to speak about was flooding, water pooling, structural problems, hydrology, geology, engineering, and building construction. I think that letter that was read by Stu Rubinow from Dr. Durser-Kazian really covered a lot. So let me just talk some brief history about the area. Originally, there was a river that was running down what is now Amory Street, and today this river is underground. Amory Park and attending areas comprise Cedar Swamp, which was later filled in with backfill, and you heard a little bit about backfill before, and I'll talk more about that too. It's unknown what the backfill really is, although we do know it's cinders, and what it's completely comprised of. So based on that background, that history, there are some kind of generalized concerns that various people have talked about here. And I would say you've heard about the flooding. I just want to add one piece there, that it wasn't too long ago that Brookline spent about $1 million to actually address the flooding in Amory Park. And unfortunately, the park is still flooding, and to the best of my knowledge, we don't know why or what's causing that. Second thing I want to talk about is water pooling, and that really relates to percolation. And I think, again, what you heard from Stu Rubinow speaks to that very well. But what I would just want to add there is that the construction of any buildings that are in the Amory Park Cottage Farm area would necessitate consideration of the percolation challenges and resulting solutions, which could include dry wells, and that's continued maintenance there. Okay, my next point was structural problems, and I think what I want to say here is that living in Freeman Park condominiums, we had very similar problems to what you just heard about. And we had to spend an enormous amount of money to have structural engineers come in and tell us why one of our buildings was literally starting to collapse. Not only did we pay for that analysis, but we had to pay for getting that fixed, and it was extremely expensive. But what we found was that there were cinders again. And so it causes us to wonder, when you add water to cinders, I mean, what are cinders? Cinders are basically coal that's from a fireplace, they're burned. What really happens to that residue when you add that water? So I'm just going to add one piece to the hydrology and geology and engineering, and that's really that at the end, at the other end of Amory Street, away from what you heard from the Beacon Street report, there was also a construction at 50 Worthington. And to support the weight of that house, there was an expenditure of $1 million to build an underpinning, creating an extensive and a deep network of pilings that were driven into the ground to establish a steady base. So based on these known facts, I think a number of us in the neighborhood would just feel that this would not be a good place to build a very heavy structure.
Thank you. Lori Ginelli, and after Ms. Ginelli is Don Haber.
Hi, I'm Lori Ginelli, and I live at the corner of Amory Street and Freeman Streets at 115 Freeman Street. The traffic corridor pertaining to the Cottage Farm site, Amory Street, Freeman Street, Powell Street, is a heavily used one during the daily, weekday commute to and from the BU Bridge and Storrow Drive. There is a stop sign at Amory and Freeman, and I happen to live right above that stop sign. And I can tell you personally that for these commuters and others, as can be documented by the number of police reports issued to motorists, there is often a police car deployed in the driveway to the park right now to ticket motorists for failing to stop. Furthermore, the U Street easement behind our building is being used regularly at quite a speed to seek shortcuts in and out of that corridor. The placement of a school in the Cottage Farm area would be an additional burden on that corridor, which already has documented existing heavy thoroughfare. The majority of children who would be walking to the Cottage Farm site would have to cross Amory Street on their way to school. As mentioned earlier, Amory Street is a major artery connecting Brookline with Cambridge and is overloaded during the morning rush period. Enabling children crossing would stall the traffic and endanger the children. There's been little focus on delivering and pickup and drop-off of their children daily, and the danger that would escalate considerably to neighbors, passers-by, and of course to the school children. Those who arrive by car will further exacerbate the awful situation that already exists. The only proposed entrance to the school parking lot is also off Amory, and there will be hundreds of cars in the morning turning in and out of that lot, all of it during rush hour. There is no way to widen the street on either side, and it cannot possibly handle additional traffic. There is already weekly gridlock on weekday mornings between 7:30 and 9:30 a.m. Add a few hundred cars if a school is built, and the area will be impossible to access for residents, commuters, students, and school personnel. This neighborhood, as we all know, is the most densely populated in Brookline. To add the burden of an elementary school with the accompanying traffic and new safety concerns would not benefit anyone. Why build in a neighborhood where you have so little support, as heard from tonight, when you have a huge number of Brookline residents begging you to build there?
Don Haber's up, and Peter Sinopoulos is after Mr. Haber.
Hi, my name is Don Haber, excuse me, and I live on Avon Street, and I'm a direct abutter to Larz Anderson Park. I'm also the vice president. Sorry, I'm tall. I'll put it up. Can I start my 3 minutes so they can hear?
That's fair.
Is that fair? Thank you. I'm Don Haber. I live on Avon Street, and I'm a direct abutter to Larz Anderson Park. I'm also the vice president of the Jamaica Hills Association, which is an organization in Jamaica Plain and Moss Hill that represents over 750 households in Boston. I can sum up my position. 4 words: save Larz Anderson Park. As the chairwoman said earlier, the proposal to build a school in Larz Anderson Park is a proposal to build a commuter school, not a school where kids can walk to school and be able to get there easily. The proposed, the proposed location, as far as been shown in the report, there are virtually no children that live within the quarter-mile distance of that school. I agree with the other comments that were said tonight to follow what were the criteria, walkability, and things like that. Don't pave over green space to put this school. The other thing I want to emphasize is there are already 6 schools within about a quarter of a mile from this proposed location. The Dexter School, the British International School, Southfield School, Show Boston, Park School, Hellenic College. Traffic in the morning and evening when school starts and stops is already horrendous. But I want to also really emphasize, in my opinion, that going down the road, implementing the Larz Anderson School proposal will be a very long and difficult path, and here's why. There are still issues and questions regarding whether Article 97 applies to this. The abutters would have that ability to litigate that. Second, your federal restrictions on your grant. Third, and this never gets mentioned, about 5 acres of Larz Anderson Park sits in the city of Boston. And the proposed school would use green open space to pave over to make 100 parking spaces and also build a 10,000 square foot shed in the city of Boston. And it has already been said in the report, to do that will require zoning relief from the city of Boston. The first place you will come is to our Jamaica Hills Association to get that relief. And I can tell you there is absolutely no support from us, the Jamaica Plain Neighborhood Council, and others in Boston to give any relief to see green space paved over and a 10,000 square foot shed built in Boston.
Peter Sinopoulos is up, and after Peter, Jane Zhao, 676 Washington. I can't read the handwriting.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. My name is Peter Sinopoulos. I live on Hopkins Road. Larz Anderson Park is my backyard. I'm within 100 yards of the entrance on that corner of Avon and Pond Street. I think the Marchi recommendation is flawed, obviously. I think we can all agree, as it appears that it misapplied its own criteria. I really don't get it. Both Cottage Farm and Larz Anderson Park are not good places for the school. I am emotional about it. I grew up there. I've been there for 60 years. I know every square inch of that park. I met my wife there. She lived in the Larz Anderson Park with her 11 brothers and sisters. We grew up there. And people think, I think maybe one decision was that this little sliver of Larz Anderson Park sticking into Boston, no one's really going to care about it. Okay, but I'll tell you, the people in Moss Hill don't know about it yet. My wife started sending out an email 2 weeks ago, and I read the email. A school in Larz Anderson Park, Jane, have you been drinking? I said, yeah, you're crazy. I said, they never think of doing that. She says, I think it could happen. So anyway, just a couple of things. You know, it's emotional, but I respect the process. I've been in government for 32 years myself, and I respect the process, and I understand the problems that you're going to encounter in doing this. No one wants it in their backyard. But first, I have to ask a question. How many people here live within a quarter of a mile of that corner of Larz Anderson Park? Okay, well, that answers my first question. Saying, okay, now I understand why not too many people oppose Larz Anderson Park. But the people in South Brookline, I agree, they need a school in South Brookline, but not Larz Anderson Park, because that's my first issue, is public safety issues. Okay, public safety is, right now, there's 6 schools, as Dawn said, and having that school at Larz, there's 2 ways to get there, Goddard Avenue and Pond Street. Very narrow roads, especially that corner. It's a major cut through from Boston to 128, especially with the Curly overpass. That place is like the Southeast Expressway during school hours. And I'm telling you, you are right, and I agree 100% with the people from South Brookline. You need a school, but not a Larz Anderson Park. The first person said that. The reason why is every morning I travel from the entrance at Hawkins Road to Puttingham. It takes me half an hour on a good day. When it snows out, the traffic is back up all the way down from Jamaica Pond all the way up to Puttingham in the snow. I don't know if anybody realized that. It's the world's worst place. The other thing is public safety. Kids are going to be tempted to walk there in an emergency situation through that park at night. It's crazy. I would never let my kid do that. But, you know, a quarter of a mile or a mile, I mean, plenty of you probably have walked there. But I don't know if I'd want my 5th grader to be doing that. But anyway, there's environmental concerns. That corner, there's an aquifer there. And the level is about 8 feet below Pond Street. And there's a pond there whenever it rains. You're going to have to be worried about that water diversion, especially with the Armenian nursing home. Legal impediments, we know what those are. You're in an uphill battle. Political implications. No one in Boston knows about this. Okay, but you're going to build a parking lot there. I mean, heck, there's been songs from the 70s, right? In the 70s about building parking lots in paradise. This is paradise. Okay, this is paradise, especially for those people in Jamaica Plain. And that's basically it. But I just wanted to, I really appreciate the comments. And I'm telling you, when the people in Jamaica Plain, they're very progressive, Ward 19-2, the most progressive people in the city of Boston, you're going to need a bigger room than this dealing with Boston, I'm telling you. Thank you very much.
Next person is, I can't read the handwriting, Jane Zhao, 676 Washington Street. Going once. Next up then is Lori Janelli, who's already spoken, right? Timothy Gillette. And after Timothy is Linda Olson-Pelkey.
Good evening, I'm Tim Gillette. I live at 2 St. Paul Street in Brookline. I abut the Stop and Shop. The proposal that's on for that, we have a 49-unit building. It was built in exact coordination with the town of Brookline's parking requirements. This proposal eliminates 13 spaces, and that puts us out of compliance, and in fact, in my belief, renders our property unviable. So there's problem 1. Problem 2, traffic. There'll be, instead of a cul-de-sac behind our house, which is good, because people just come in there, drop parking space, park away, but it'll be an active thing, so it turns a cul-de-sac into a street, with the kind of traffic of a street right behind us. And somebody is going to get killed, the way people are driving. And I'm not very happy about the possibilities of that. Also, I point out that there's a big block that says transformers from electric company. Well, that's true. There's a big transformer farm in there. I worry that a construction accident or even a very bad car accident might impact that transformer area, and if it does, it could knock out power to all over the place and have a nice toxic waste dump if things get bad enough because of the oil in the transformers, which contains PCB. So, not a pretty sight.
Thank you. Timothy, Linda, sorry. Linda.
Linda
And
Olsen-Pelkey.
After Linda is Arthur or Sue Cole?
I pass.
Okay. And then it would be Sarah Stoutland. Linda.
Okay, Linda Olsen-Pelkey. I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 2. I really want to thank you guys for sitting here and listening to all our comments and letting us share our thoughts. I think we've heard some new information about the two top sites, and it seems that we are now in a position where selecting an option needs kind of a reboot. And I think that that gives us a great opportunity to step back and reconsider the criteria we are using to choose an appropriate site for a new school and to broaden our thinking about school typologies. The need to build additional public school space is an opportunity for Brookline to advance our planning practices, to incorporate the principles of smart growth planning and climate change resiliency. Building with these principles in mind could set a new and better standard for the development in Brookline going forward, with the town leading by example. And you've heard some other people speak to this already. Such an approach could also yield an innovative and highly desirable new school. Smart growth planning is the outgrowth of greater understanding about how to build human-scaled, walkable, and active communities, and the growing awareness of the negative health and environmental consequences of sprawl development. Selecting the site for a new school should first be viewed through the lens of these principles, which coincidentally are aligned with the Commonwealth Community Compact Brookline just signed. The smart growth principles that I think are important here are encourage the reuse of existing buildings and foster mixed-use development, preserve and protect open space and increase it when possible. Consider the ease of access by walking, biking, and public transportation, and consider the environmental impacts of your building and seek to minimize them, including reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Certain sites identified by Civic Moxie are better aligned with smart growth planning than others. For instance, the Stop and Shop and TJ Maxx sites are particularly attractive because they do not take any open space resources, are extremely walkable, and have the added benefit of redeveloping commercial properties, which could be made more productive, attractive, and active. The old Lincoln School should be looked at in more depth as well, I believe, because it is centrally located and reuses an existing building. I understand the incredible pressure the Selectmen and School Committee are under, but I hope that doesn't make us look only to the easiest, most expedient options, which tend to focus on taking our scarce open space resources. This is a decision with long-range consequences for everyone in Brookline. Let's make the effort to see this as an opportunity to do something exceptional. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Stoutland, and after Ms. Stoutland is Michael Berger.
Okay. I'm Sarah Stoutland. I live at 104 Westbourne Terrace. I have 3 kids in the Brookline school system and have been active both at the high school as a parent and at Driscoll. So I actually am kind of disappointed because nobody said what I'm going to say today, which is we're not a K-8 system. We're a pre-K to 12 system. And my concern is that we aren't, as we're thinking a lot about this pre-K to 8, we've heard a lot of technicalities, and yet I've heard nothing about how this might fit in from you really ever, both selectmen, and how this might fit into the 9 to 12. What are we going to do about the high school? We don't know if we're going to need to build a second high school yet, and if we do need to build a second high school, where are we going to do it? And I also still don't understand. I mean, for me, I still don't understand why we're so drawn to the K-8 school system. I don't understand why a pre-K-6 school is any less of a neighborhood school than a K-8 school. I'm an education researcher. I know there is no definitive research on why the K-8 configuration is better than any other configuration, partly because there's no definitive research in education. And I don't understand why we haven't thought about a one-building solution, which is you can do anything. You could do 7 to 12, you could do 7 to 9, you could do 10 to 12. One of my concerns is that I think a lot of people think, oh, we'll just be able to expand in place in the high school. And the thing that we need to understand is when you get to 2,800 kids, which we will be when my now 6th grader is a senior, is you can't organize a high school in the same way. Put that on top of a 21st century high school needing a 21st education, put that on top of a much more diverse student body, and you've got a lot of parts moving around where you're not going to all be able to fit it into a space where you used to be able to put one student. And so what I'm really asking is for, can we get a vision of a pre-K to 12 where we really see it, where we're not just building it one at a time, which is what it feels like. We're looking at what problem, then, oh, well, now we have this problem. And what is the pre-K to 12 vision?
After Mr. Berger is Rachel, I can't read the handwriting. To St. Paul Street.
Michael Berger, 112 Walcott Road, Precinct 15. One of the founders of the Brookline Green Space Alliance, former Park and Rec Commissioner. I'm here to speak to you tonight, though not just to advocate for our retention and maintenance of open space, but to talk about how we can solve a real problem, which I think the process to date is preliminary, and I think from what I've heard tonight, there are a lot of great ideas that I hope will be considered by everybody in the process. So the discussion tonight is more than just about finding a location for a building for the 9th elementary school. What I've heard is concerns about neighborhoods. I've heard concerns about what the town will look like in 10, 20, 30 years. We do actually have some ongoing thoughts about what the town should look like and how we can afford it. The open space plan in terms of open space, and the comprehensive plan, planning, the transportation plan. There are many plans, and one of the things that I'm curious and have not heard yet is how the Civic Moxie proposal and analysis fits into those existing plans that have involved many of the citizens over the years. And so what we're really talking about is not just the 9th elementary school or the high school. We're not just talking about schools, we're talking about the future of Brookline. And in that case, we've heard a lot of needs. We've heard about the need for a neighborhood school in South Brookline. We've heard about needs for open space. But the changes that we bring about, whatever process continues, is not going to affect just our children, but it's going to affect us in terms of our parks, transportation is going to be affected, and that's a regional issue. That's not just that's just not a local issue. And nobody's brought it up, I think, but taxes. In other words, this is going to have to be paid for. We might actually change our community significantly by not making it affordable for people to live here. And I urge you to consider a process that involves the whole community, not view this as a school project, but to view it as something for the betterment of Brookline in the future.
And then after Rachel is J. Arnold Stoltz.
My better half.
Ah, okay.
Hello, I'm Rachel O'Brien Souls. My son graduated from Brookline High School, went on to graduate from Brown, then did a PhD and does biotechnology research now. So the fundamental education here at Brookline has been of tremendous value, and I understand it. We live in St. Paul Street, and I see mothers and children all the time. I also see cars and trucks, and those mothers and children are breathing that same air, that same polluted air, and I always wonder what's the impact. So when the school issue came up, I called at MIT Kathleen Vandever, a PhD at the Center for Environmental Health Sciences, who in turn called the Harvard School of Public Health, and we looked at publications that show the impact of particulate matter and increases asthma in children. And I will give you a bibliography with information. Harvard Street is one of the most congested streets. On top of that, you are planning to put a school next to a garage. There are plenty of studies to show that this is the worst possible thing you can do to the children. Truly. You are putting children in a school that is going to abut the sidewalk. I hear all kinds of issues about wetlands and trees. How about the children? So the children are going to breathe this air, and you're going to have a real impact on their health. Please consider that as the primary issue of where you're going to place them in a school. Thank you.
Mr. Stoltz, and after Mr. Stoltz is Ronnie Dane.
I'm Arnold Stoltz. I live at 2 St. Paul Street.
Stoltz, I'm sorry.
In this environment in which we live, where incidents at San Bernardino or Newtown have occurred, I find it scary to have a mixed use of a commercial space with perhaps a couple thousand people on site of a school. Have you considered the security implications and the ongoing security implications of shared space between a commercial facility and a school? And please protect our children.
Thank you. Ronnie Dane. Going once. Jim Franco.
I pass.
Okay. Stephen Porter.
Pass.
Jonathan Unglaub. And after Mr. Unglaub, Mary Dewart.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Unglaub. I live at 135 Freeman Street. And I guess what I just want to say this evening is that I'm struck at looking at the preferred choices that there's a preference for the elimination of green open space rather than the elimination of parking lots, which is a blight on the urban environment. It seems to me the best solution is to submerge parking and build schools above, whether at the TJ Maxx site or on Center Street behind Coolidge Corner, where it's a huge construction project, but there are already plans for doing that. Why not do everything that Brookline wants to do? Expand the Coolidge Corner Theater, build a new library, build a new school, put several levels of underground parking at Center Street, which is the epicenter of the town. It would facilitate walkability. In the case of the TJ Maxx lot, I believe the other advantage of Center Street is that the town already owns the property. In the case of TJ Maxx, it's again a parking lot. There's almost, I think the TJ Maxx store would still exist, but it's otherwise just an empty parking lot with one bank, which of course we don't need. We could afford to lose a bank in this town, in our commercial districts, if you want to know the truth. And again, from what I understand, the owner of that property is not interested in seeing it developed, and could probably, the TJ Maxx parking lot could be acquired not through eminent domain, but through a friendly purchase. So I would really push for the elimination of parking lots in building a school rather than the elimination of open green space. Thank you.
Mary Dewart, and after Ms. Dewart is Irene Scharf.
Mary Dewart, town meeting member from Precinct 3. I was distressed when I saw the two proposed sites because they seem to have wandered from the criteria so carefully thought out of walkability and principles that are essential for success. And we've learned tonight from so many knowledgeable people of the lived experience of places, and learned so much from the understanding, from the technical the engineering aspects of these sites. And I think that we need to go back to the criteria that Linda Pelkey talked about, and I think we also need to consider more carefully this notion of vision and innovation, and the sense that, as others have said, the opportunity to lead, the opportunity to invent and innovate is essential for bringing this community together. This is an opportunity to bring us together, the open space people, the school people, the people who care about kids, the people who care about the environment. And that's how we're going to win, and everyone will win, when the stakeholders are brought together and can align in a vision that is exciting and innovative and one that will last for a long time.
Irene Scharf.
Irene passed. She went home.
Okay. Richard Enders. Going once. Nahun Karlinski. Okay. Sarah Muqtada. And after Sarah is Sam Batchelder.
Hi, I'm Sarah Muqtada. I live on 16 Chilton in Cottage Farm. And this is not easy because these are my beloved neighbors, and then somebody who was so helpful to me at Devotion when I worked there just got up and spoke. But I'm going to speak in a different vein. I live in Cottage Farm. My house abuts Amory Playground. And my 3 kids learned to ride their bikes there, and we kind of use the park as an extension of our backyard. Given the changing demographic in Brookline, and having followed this process for the last 7 years, I welcome the building of a school on Amory Playground. And the proposed school would personally benefit my family. We right now walk a mile to Lawrence School, cross at Beacon and Kent. And so it would be great for us to have a school in our neighborhood that doesn't have a school. It also would benefit the cohort. My kids are in early elementary. It would benefit their whole cohort townwide to solve this issue of overcrowding. And I also see it from a point of view of an educator. I get really excited about the ideas of building a school in this lot next to Amory Playground, what we could do with the playground, with Hall's Pond. Because when I was working at Brookline, my team of teachers got together and we had mapping projects that happened at Hall's Pond. We did invasives as community service, and so there's a lot of potential for that. And for those reasons, I support the proposed site of Cottage Farm.
Thank you. Mr. Batchelder, and after Mr. Batchelder is Brian Hochleutner.
Sandy Batchelder. I live at 303 Goddard Avenue, across the street from the park, and I'm an officer of the Friends of Larz Anderson Park. 2 points I'd like you to think about. First, at town meeting, an article was passed over because we were assured that the park was protected legally by a federal grant restriction. Since then, it appears that there's talk of waiving or seeking a waiver of the federal restriction, and maybe by swapping land, which you acquire somewhere else for the park. If that's so, I think town meeting was misled. And the article should be put back before the town meeting for a vote, so that we can make sure that 55 acres of the park is permanently restricted for use as a park and not for anything else. So that's one point. My memory is failing me because of age, but let me think of the second part. It all depends where the school is sited in Larz Anderson. You have a chart outside that shows it behind the Auto Museum. Land is presently being used by the DPW, the building department. It's a mess back there, and if the school was restricted to that kind of a site, I don't think it would impact the park that much. The problem is if you go waiving the federal restriction, will it open it up? That's why I'd like to see, if it was Article 9, I've forgotten the number.
97.
7.
Article 6.
I'd like to see it voted upon. And the other thought to consider is there's been a lot of data about the need for a new school in South Brookline. And the Pine Manor School has been selling off property to stay alive. And I think you should talk to them. Instead of swapping land and aiming for Larz Anderson, why don't you see if you can make a deal with Pine Manor? If it's part of their educational mission to have a school on the property, it might be something they'd consider. And it would be a better location as far as transportation is concerned than the very edge of town on the backside of the Larz Anderson Park. Thank you. That's all I have.
After Mr. Hochleitner, it's Kate Patterson.
Brian Hochleitner. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 6. I live at 35 Elm Street. Got a couple kids in Pierce. And, you know, I generally am a lover of local government and of these kind of processes, but just sitting in the audience tonight and listening, I've been keeping account of the number of speakers and trying to keep track of who actually spoke in favor of anything in terms of a particular site, a particular option, not in favor of let's reboot the process, let's save the parks, let's preserve walkability, let's all these things that we can pretty easily all agree upon. I mean, even the idea of like a school in South Brookline, yeah, that's great, I agree, but we need to find a specific site. I think that, you know, it's frustrating, and it's I worry about where this process is heading if people aren't willing to kind of say, I don't support X, but I support Y, and here's why I support Y. So taking a page from my own advice, I'll speak a little bit about a couple of things. One is that I think where we are in the process right now, we should be focused on trying to come up with not the site, but a couple of sites, 2, 3, 4 sites that can be studied more carefully. So I actually think that the 2 sites at the top of the list are worth studying more. I know there's a lot of people in the room that disagree. I think that, for example, the Larz Anderson site, I would consider supporting that if it was part of the process where we were acquiring other parkland to kind of do a swap, and that there wasn't a loss of parkland. I think that the Cottage Farm site is something that, you know, it's got a lot of issues, but it's also, you know, is one of the more walkable areas, so I think it's something we should look at more. But I'll just talk briefly about 2 other sites. I did, in my tally, there were 35 people who spoke, and I think there were 5 who spoke for specific sites, but 2 spoke for the Stop and Shop site. I think the Stop and Shop site is one that really, if there ever was a site that deserved to be studied more and looked at more and thought about more, it's that site. If you add the Stop and Shop site itself plus the car wash and the gas station, it's 3.5 acres. It's a big property. And so you really could work out a way to do a mixed-use project there, I think. It certainly would be complicated, but I think it's one that we should keep on the table. The other one is one that I think Civic Moxie has now admitted that they sort of erroneously took off the list, which is Parsons Field, the northeastern field. That's a site that is currently open space, but you could, it's about 7 acres. It's a really big site, so you could actually build a school there without taking down a single tree. It's AstroTurf field. It's privately owned. It's something where we could still have active ball fields there and have a school. Civic Moxie determined as part of their report that we shouldn't consider it more carefully because we would have to find relocated ball space for Northeastern, which that's just not the law. That's not how eminent domain works. We would pay for the value of the site if we were going to acquire it or acquire part of it. So I think that's another one that should be studied more closely. Thank you.
Thank you. Kate Patterson, going once, twice. Alan Christ. After Mr. Christ, Francis Cobb.
The town, my name's Alan Christ. I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 4, and I'm in the Green Caucus also. The town has spent many years now studying the overcrowding problem and proposing solutions, and it's clear that we need to move forward with the best compromise we can find, even if it is imperfect in some ways. While it's the town's duty to accommodate residents' concerns as much as possible, it is important to remember that there will always be opposition from enough abutters to fill a room in town hall. And the town should move ahead with the option that your analysis shows to be best. Each of the semi-finalist sites has positive qualities, and many of them would be suitable for a much-needed night school. That said, I think that the Cottage Farm site surpasses the other sites by many measures. It has the advantage of not building on any protected open spaces in the area while allowing our children to have close proximity to the open spaces that we cherish, in the manner of other elementary schools in the town. At the moment, BU could build as of right on the proposed Cottage Farm site, and I feel that the town would benefit more from a public use that's thoughtfully screened with vegetation in the front and back and replaces the MAB parking underneath the school. Additionally, the playground space could be shared with MAB. As for the use of Amory, it's notable that the Cottage Farm site would be completely screened from the park by Amory Woods, and there's not the same sense of ownership of the park that the previous Amory proposal assumed. The K-2 playground would be located on the site of the school, which would ensure that no structural changes would be proposed at Amory Park. The only potential change would be a shared use agreement between the school and the parks, which could potentially allow the northern 1/3 of the park to be used by the school between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. The Cottage Farm district would also include a reasonable percentage of affordable and low-income units, and investing in our low and moderate income residents is one of the best messages that the town can send when locating a new school. It would ensure that lower-income families are benefiting from what would be the town's newest and most technologically advanced school. Finally, many concerns have been expressed about traffic in the Cottage Farm area, but this is in fact one of the criteria where the Cottage Farm site excels relative to the other schemes. Per the Civic Moxie study, the school would have a walkability rating of 51%, which was the highest of the 6 finalist sites, and the large majority of the proposed district is within a half-mile walk of the school, while the entire district is within 0.8 miles of the school.
3 minutes.
To summarize, although I will support any solution that's chosen by the town, the Cottage Farm site has more positive attributes than the other 5 options, and a walkable urban school in this site would be a positive expression of the town's values. That said, the town should extensively study this site along with at least 2 other options in a transparent process that could even include an open design competition.
Okay.
This would give everyone a tangible sense of each proposal beyond the schematic plans.
Thank you, Mr. Chris. Francis Cobb, going once. Susan White, going once. Vivian Schmidt. Regina Frawley. And on deck is our last speaker signed up, is Elisa Jonas.
Regina Frawley from Precinct 16, almost 50-year resident of Russet Road. I know the area reasonably well. I'm here to support my neighbors, and no matter what happens in North Brookline, as people have indicated, it won't solve the problem in South Brookline. For the federal government, I did the decennial population count, the demographics of South Brookline, in particular Hancock Village. very few people realize that between 2000 and 2010, almost 800 people increased in population just from Hancock Village. And that's before any other population projections could be. So if there's very few people in the room who attended the comprehensive plan from 2000 to 2005, and even fewer who attended all of them, and I'm pretty much one of those people, it was talked about. We're going back 15 years ago. It was talked about how the principle would be that Brookline would grow and we would need more space, and that's 15 years ago, and we've done nothing about it. When it came to South Brookline, it was mentioned that the owner of Hancock Village was going to do something with the garage there. There's a very large garage to the rear, and I never gave that any thought. I took it at face value. But when we did the site tours of Hancock Village, it came out from the owners of Hancock Village that the reason that they're not doing anything there is because they couldn't use the garage. People just didn't want to walk that far in this modern day from their units in Hancock Village to the garage. So the garage was sitting there empty. I wonder if the owner of Hancock Village would be open to leasing, long-term leasing, that garage. The children would not need additional space as far as playing. They're within walk. In fact, this Board of Selectmen gave the owner easement from the rear of the property into the school ground. So they would actually be able to do, not have to use more than the playground equipment they already have. There's also the Allendale Farm, which, as lovely as it is, the owners have been selling off parcels over the years for development, gated communities, so I'm not sure that their future plans include forever being a farm. Most of their produce comes in by truck. They don't do it anymore as much as they did before. And as far as finally for Hancock Village, if we think outside the box, it is entirely conceivable that a portion of the actual units could be purchased or taken, and again build a slab school, because everything they're talking about Amory Park happens to be true for South Brookline. So I think it's time to think outside the box and come up with other solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jonas, and if there's anyone else who wishes to speak who hasn't signed up, can just line up.
Hi, I'm Elisa Jonas, Precinct 16. I live at 333 Russet Road. I'm
sorry.
Okay. Should I?
Yeah, let's start.
Oh.
Yeah. Whoops. Go ahead.
Do you want me to give my name again?
I do have some more signs.
Anyways, I guess I come here, I have my two hats, and the one is that I'm really concerned about green space, smart growth. I love the idea of the Stop and Shop site. I think it could revitalize that whole area, which is commercially neglected. But I'm primarily here right now to speak about South Brookline because I really am concerned about the loss of a neighborhood school for so many students there. But I also acknowledge that I haven't studied in detail the needs in North Brookline, and from what I'm hearing, it sounds like we really need extra capacity in the north and the south, and I'm not sure that it's going to be feasible to solve the problem of having neighborhood schools and deal with one school. So I think we're going to have to deal with that, and I don't know what the financial consequences of that are. But with regard to the South Brookline School, I do want to discuss some confusion about South Brookline, which has led, I think, some people to think of certain sites that I don't think would be walkable sites for the majority of students in South Brookline. Today, there was a fellow Brookliner, but from the Northern Hemisphere, and they asked me to clarify the South Brookline school problem and why a school at Pine Manor would not be an ideal solution. And I think what's confusing about that is that there's two ways to define South Brookline. And I think for many people, South Brookline is whatever is to the south of Route 9, but also to the south of Lincoln School. But if you look at the map, you're going to see that a huge part of that southern half of South Brookline is either golf courses or parks or the estate area. And it just so happens that the estate area likely has most of its kids going to private schools, so they're not really going to care where that other school is. So the densely populated clusters are much further south. There's a small cluster, Buttonwood, and then there's a very large cluster, and it's Precinct 16 and parts of 15, which used to be Precinct 16, but because Precinct 16 has grown so much, Precinct 15 has taken a portion of that, and that's what we fondly called Sobro. And as we've already heard, there's 800 kids there, and there's 100 kids in the buffer zone that are now going to different schools and getting bused there. And then there's the 100 students over capacity, then there's Hancock Village. So I think the need for school capacity in South Brookline is not in the estate area where Pine Manor is located, though they are selling off parcels, but more south where more students could walk.
3 minutes.
And a reminder that if we solve the problem in South Brookline, we also solve some of the problem in North Brookline when those students no longer have to go in that area.
Thank you.
And for those, are we done?
Yep.
Are we done? Then I won't go to the next part.
Tommy Patolo? And then Tommy had signed up. I missed the, and then I'll take anyone else who wishes to speak.
Tommy Vitolo, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 6. I know lots of folks have talked about adding to open space and walkability, and I echo those remarks. What I think is important is for us to consider the difference between complicated and risky. They're both important concepts. We need to be careful about them. Stop and Shop site is complicated. That's true. But we got a lot of smart people in the front of the room, and they know other smart people. And with a few bucks, we could hire even more smart people. I'm not worried about complicated. I think we can work through complicated. We're talking about a 100-year asset. So if it's a little complicated, that's okay. If it's the right decision, we'll figure it out. Risky, on the other hand, is something different altogether, and it's also important. I acknowledge sites like Stop and Shop have risks, and we can even get into known unknowns and unknown unknowns, right? We should look more carefully at those risks and do our best to understand if there are any showstoppers, and if those showstoppers are going to show up at the beginning of the process or in the middle of the process. That's really important. And it's important for all sites. I think we're sort of fixated on the complicated urban sites having these risks. Hey, look, Larz Anderson had this risk too. Maybe we're not allowed to build a school there at all. I hope we figure that out at some point, hopefully before we're halfway through building it. So I just want to make sure that we don't use complicated as an excuse. It's not an excuse. We're too good for that. I also want to make sure we understand what the risks are of each site. And, you know, we may take a risk. I think it's okay to take a risk. Let's do our best to understand what the risks of each of the sites are. And I'm worried about the showstoppers. And figure that out really quickly, because I'm worried that, you know, who knows, maybe there's some Eversource transformer in the middle of the Stop and Shop site. It turns out we just can't build there. Let's figure that out now. And if it's not there, let's move on and pick the site that best suits our needs for the next 10, 50, 100 years, even if it is a complicated site. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we've exhausted the sign-ups. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Arlene?
My name is Arlene Madison, 209 Pond Avenue. I'm a member of the Brookline Green Space Alliance and was also for 19 years a volunteer with the Brookline School proudly. It's almost every kind of position you can think of to volunteer for. I learn a lot from listening, and tonight was such a valuable experience. I think that part of the frustration for people in the room and not in the room was with the process, and having 26 sites come down to 6 or come down to 2 with very little public process. At least that's what it felt like, I think, for a lot of citizens. And I think there is still a lot of questions. I think there are questions about demographics and where the population, and I think South Brookline has made a convincing argument tonight, but where is the greatest need? I think you said, Susan, you know, one of the things you might talk about at some point is what happens if there isn't a 9th school built. Well, what does happen? I think if you're going to ask for override votes and support votes in town meeting, we need to know that. Also, the complications of eminent domain. I happen to have lived in a community that was taken by eminent domain. It's not pretty. There are a lot of things, I think, that need to be considered. But I also wonder about the principles that this process will take the town forward with. The Commonwealth Community Pact was mentioned tonight. Our comprehensive plan has a no net loss policy for open space. What does that mean? Do we care? Why do people move to Brookline? Do we stand for anything? What do people expect when they come here? We don't have an overabundance of open space. There was a Trust for Public Land park report in 2011 that listed the median parkland per 1,000 residents as 12.9 acres per person in 85 of the U.S. largest cities, and I can include us because we're so dense that number is reasonable to compare to. Brookline has 9.8 acres per person. We're not the highest in comparable communities. We have a deficit, if you look at our open space plan, and it's been listed that way for years, a deficit of open space. And if we're increasing our school-age population, we need more open space for children. They don't only need classroom space, they need outdoor play space. So the decisions we make, as has been said, are far-reaching decisions, but I feel that they really they will reflect who we are going forward for many years, and I hope that we can slow down, reflect, get some more numbers, make a case that will really show that we're a great community going forward.
Thank you. So, we have another person.
Andy Dean, 210 Bonad in South Brookline. I agree and echo everything that's already been said about the South Brookline site, how much we need a school. I just want to make one quick point that I think some people think that in South Brookline people don't walk to Baker School, and I think that is definitely not true. I walk my son to school every morning, and we live about half a mile from the school, and that's definitely walkable. A quarter mile seems to me like a very short distance, so I think you should just keep that in mind, that people walk from further distances than a quarter mile. And I can tell you there's a flood of kids that come up Russet Road in the morning. Every morning it's like insane, and it's like the same amount of flood comes down the hill from the area, up Shaw Road, and it's just so many people walk to Baker, and I think that we really need another school, and people will walk there, and it would make a huge difference in South Brookline. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So, seeing no more speakers, the next time these two boards will come together will be on December 15th. I think we're doing it early in the evening, 6 p.m. I think. But check that. Don't go on my word on that one yet. At that point, we're going to be coming together and kind of assessing where we're at and trying to come up with a path forward. So, Susan.
Yeah, no, I just want to say before we close that on behalf of both boards, thank you all for coming out. Thank you for listening to each other. Thank you for educating us. And as you can see, we really believe strongly in balancing a data-driven process with a process that includes a lot of community input and listening to the community's values, and we're really appreciative to all of you for the time that you've put into these conversations with your neighbors, coming out tonight, your emails and everything. So thank you very much, and more to come in a couple weeks.